Let's go, stay back. Oh yeah.
For years, I avoided a deadlift. I had a back injury, made it so I didn't want to do it. And then I learned, you know what? Doing it with proper form and doing different variations, it's where it's at to get through that. So I've got Marcus Philly, who is an amazing, amazing educator when it comes down to programming. And he's gonna teach me 5 different deadlift variations that you can try as well.
Awesome. Let's jump into it. And actually, as we do that, I'll just share that I had the same story as you. In college, I had a really bad back injury and I avoided deadlifts for a long time. And then it became this weakness of mine. And when I started competing in CrossFit, I couldn't have that as a weakness because we tested it often. So I had to figure out, how am I going to approach deadlifting and get stronger in this position and not leave it as a weakness of mine? And having movement variety was key. Getting different positions in this deadlifting was going to allow me to kind of build up all of the different muscles around the movement pattern, and then also having variations on how I was going to put my body under tension. And we'll talk about tempo, we'll talk about pauses, we'll talk about a couple different things today. But really, deadlifts are meant to train our posterior chain. So hamstrings, glutes, and our back. And one of the reasons people end up having back issues when they're deadlifting is because their mechanics or their technique doesn't load the hamstrings and the glutes effectively. If these get a lot of the tension in this movement, it protects our low back. So when somebody comes into a deadlift and they get into a bad posture, their glutes and their hamstrings are not under tension, and they go to lift, it puts all the stress into the wrong place versus the right place. So loading properly in these portions of our body before we get into our back is so critical to maintaining good positions and supporting and protecting our back when we deadlift. We talked about this morning when we were doing our sumos. I said we really want to get those knees back and out of the way when we deadlift. That's what's stretching out the hamstring and what's putting more tension on the back of your legs than on your back.
After today's video, there is a link down below for Thrive Market. Now that is going to get you 30% off your entire grocery order. Okay, so if you are doing paleo, maybe you're doing keto, maybe you're intermittent fasting, you're trying different things out. Wish there were grocery stores that were dedicated for what kind of diet you were doing, right? Well, Thrive Market is like that. You just sort by whatever diet type you're doing and you can shop. It opens up a grocery store for you right there digitally for whatever diet you're doing, which is super cool. But the best part is using that link, you save 30% off your entire grocery order, plus a $50 free gift because you're using that link through one of my videos. So check out Thrive Market after today's video to save some cash and get some awesome products.
So the first variation we'll just show is the conventional deadlift. A conventional deadlift is kind of by definition when your arms are outside of your knees, okay? And in the conventional deadlift, we want to have a little bit of a knee bend, hips, and the shoulders directly over the bar. And that way, when I'm coming down into position, I'm driving through my legs, but I'm also pulling at the hips and putting a lot of the tension back here. A couple of common mistakes people make in the deadlift is they get down into too deep of a squat position. So this squat position is going to put all the tension on my quads, which is where now I'm vulnerable in my back because my hamstrings and my glutes haven't been loaded correctly. So one of the tips that I give people is move yourself closer to the bar, get your shins closer, and rather than look down to the bar, I want you to reach your butt out and then find the bar there. Why don't you come and try that real quick? Because this was one of the things that I saw with you is in an effort to try and keep your back safe, you were like, I gotta keep myself very vertical.
Yeah.
And when you're vertical, you're not getting these muscles all under tension. So push your knees back a little bit, lift your butt up a touch, good. And then that has you more loaded in your hamstrings and your glutes rather than in your quads.
That makes, yeah, it does make a lot more sense. And it's just, yeah, it's a natural protection to want to come over like this. But it's like once you get the confidence and you can load the hamstrings properly and you get that neural firing, makes sense.
That's right. Okay, so why have different variations of the deadlift? Because as we move our feet into different positions, and we are going to show 5 different variations, we're now learning great mechanics, technique, motor control in all the different positions that we might find ourselves in life. People want to get strong so that they can be more resilient when they're doing life. And you know, the chances that you're going to go and pick something up off the ground in this perfect position every time, I got to go pick up a box. You know, we don't always find ourselves in perfect deadlift mechanic positions. Sometimes our feet might be like this when we go to pick up a box. Sometimes we have to bend over like this to pick up something. So we want to train a variety of different positions in the gym so we can make our back and our bodies more resilient. So the second exercise is the sumo deadlift. And by definition, this is more of a deadlift where our feet are wider than our hands. Some people will be very wide with very narrow hands. Some people will be a little bit narrower with their feet, maybe wider hands, but as long as the arms are inside the knees, we're in that realm of sumo deadlifting. And I would encourage you, unless you're trying to be a competitive power lifter and lift the heaviest thing on the planet, and if you're really focused on health, wellness, just building up a more resilient back, then play with different positions. Sometimes I'll sumo deadlift a little bit narrow. Sometimes I'll sumo deadlift a bit wider. And what that does is it just puts my hips in different positions. It incorporates my adductors sometimes, maybe a little bit more hamstring, maybe a little bit more glutes, depending on the position. It's also gonna change my posture and the angle of my back as I'm pulling off the floor. So here's the position that I might find today, and the same thing applies. I want to reach my hips back, find the bar, and see that my shins are pretty vertical. I'm not in this squat position, and I do see that with the sumo deadlift, people will make this mistake much more often. They'll get deep into the squat, and then now I don't have that same tension on the back of my legs. So why don't you come around and get into that position, and we'll see if we can optimize it. Good. So go ahead and release the bar, stand back up.
Yep.
Now eyes straight forward, don't look at the bar.
Okay.
And I want you to just swing your hips back as far as you can. So try and push your butt out. Now that right there, you're getting a big stretch.
Okay.
Now put your hands to the bar. Yep, and drive your knees out. And that is a much better setup. So that is the cue that I would give. You can lift it, go ahead and lift.
Oh, that feels so much better. Yeah.
Yep. And again.
Almost reset just to teach myself.
Yeah. And up. Awesome. Yeah, so that's the cue. It used to be one of the hardest things to teach was how do we get somebody in the first couple days to deadlift correctly? And it was almost, you know, without fail, when I was an early coach, it was, you know, hey, let's go down, and people would just be in these horrible positions. And I finally, over time, came up with a sequence, which was approach the bar, whether it's this stance or the wide stance, approach the bar and make sure that the bar is right over your shoelaces. Okay, then don't look at the bar anymore. Now you're just gonna look forward, and you're gonna kind of do, you know, a bow.
Yeah.
Stick your hips back as far as you can and reach as far as you can forward, and you feel a stretch, and then, oh, look, I'm ready to go. Yeah. Just put your hands on the bar.
That was...
And never really look at it, because if you look at it, that is just a bad visual cue that just takes people into improper, you know, posture for a deadlift.
So well said. I mean, that was perfect. Just, I've never had anyone explain it like that. I love the sumo deadlift personally because I feel like I get, for me, I can fire my glutes better. I just feel like I feel it. I really feel it.
Yeah.
And I've learned that unless I am putting tension and load on a muscle in its end range, I don't really get mobility benefit a whole lot. So like for me, like I could sit there static stretching till I'm blue in the face, but it's like I don't, it just retracts. But when I actually get something where I'm really stretching my crazy tight adductors, this just like, it opens it up, and it's improved my mobility so much. It's crazy how it's improved my thoracic mobility, because how the sartorius and kind of the adductors actually can play a role with even the psoas and how everything ties in. So that's one of it is my favorite deadlift position. And
it's another reason why I think playing with different variations of movements, it's the same movement. We're picking something up off the ground. But by moving your feet around, by finding different nuanced positions, you start to like unlock things about your body. And you know, hey, again, it's like for functional bodybuilders, like the way that I approach my training and my programming, it's about getting enough variety in that we're really not leaving any part of our body sort of untouched and unturned. Okay, next up we're gonna go into what's called the Romanian deadlift, okay? So a Romanian deadlift is, and I'll go ahead and pull it all the way up here. A Romanian deadlift is where we're now gonna really emphasize just the hip hinge, not the knees. So this is one where we don't keep our knees locked. We keep them slightly bent, so not completely stiff. But from here, all I'm doing is that initial movement that I talked to you about, which was hips back, bar goes past the knee, and right back up. Hips back, bar goes right past the knee, and back up. And what this exercise is gonna really do is it's really gonna focus a lot on the hamstrings, right? We're not gonna get into that sunken down position that comes from bending the knees, which then gets you a little bit of drive from your quads. No, we're gonna keep those knees back, and we're just gonna be flexing or hinging at the hip, and that's again gonna be a big, big hamstring focus.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I like to teach this one from the top down.
Okay.
Like, it's really difficult for people to get into that optimal position at the bottom, so just do a conventional deadlift to the top,
okay,
and then eyes forward, or maybe about 8 feet in front of you, and then hips just slide the bar down your legs, push the hips back, and come back up. And I don't think that it's important to go down and touch the floor. I think it's about going to a comfortable spot where you feel like, okay, I've got tension on my hamstrings and my glutes, and from there, I can pull back up. Awesome.
Definitely feel that glute squeeze at the top a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And probably more of a stretch directly in the hamstrings as you get down towards the bottom of this one.
And I think for years, my conventional deadlift was basically an RDL. Like I was, and that's how I hurt my back, right? Mm-hmm. I wasn't getting into that sunken position properly, so I would just overload an RDL,
yep,
and it would just, there you go, that was the problem. So
yeah, and that variation that we just saw, it's gonna be significantly less total weight than you can do in a conventional deadlift, because now you're sort of taking out that sunken knee position where you can drive through your legs and through your posterior chain, and now it's just hinging at the, at the hip, so it's all hamstrings. You're not going to be quite as strong. Okay. All right. The next variation is called the snatch grip deadlift. Okay. And the snatch grip deadlift comes from the Olympic lift, the snatch, and this is basically just a wide grip with narrow stance. So we did the sumo, which was wide stance, narrow grip. The snatch grip is going to be kind of in that more conventional position where my hips are going to be low, my knees are going to be bent, and my hands are going to be outside. What most people are going to use as a benchmark is this ring, this outer ring. Now the snatch grip is going to place a really big demand on your upper back. You're going to have to actually connect with your lats and your upper back muscles to keep the bar close to your body. When you're in a snatch grip, you might not have as strong a grip because you're reaching out so wide on the bar. So this is where lifting straps can be beneficial for people. But what I love about this, and this was one of Charles Poliquin's favorite deadlift variations, because of the demand that it placed on the upper body as well as the lower body. So you'll see when you get into this, it's somebody who's had back challenges. This is also a mobility and a flexibility type of deadlift where to get down into position, you're really gonna have to sink your hips a bit more.
Yep.
You might feel restricted. So
ankle mobility too. I noticed your ankles getting more ankle mobility out of that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, those knees do have to come forward a little bit more than we had already tried before. And then really just pull the shoulder blades back some. Perfect. And from here, as you come up, just make sure those knees come out and out of the way on the way up. Pause at the top, and this one I really want you to exaggerate hips going back on the way down and keep the bar sliding down your thighs on the way down. Yes.
Much
awesome.
more, yeah.
Yeah, and so you can use that lowering phase of this particular variation to work on that mobility. I can really slow down and work on getting that stretch, finding that optimal position, because we're stronger in that lowering phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered conventional, sumo, RDL, snatch grip, and now we're going to do the unilateral bias. We'll call it a split stance deadlift or split stance RDL. And so we do a lot of two-legged, or two-armed training exercises in the gym. It's how we can overload, you know, squat, deadlift, bench. But doing things on one leg or biased towards one leg, it's awesome for building up balanced strength from side to side. And when we have balanced strength from side to side, we can reduce dramatically our susceptibility to injury. So something that I always try and incorporate is some unilateral bias training. And this is simply the same RDL that we did before, but now I'm gonna kind of kick this leg back. It's kind of like a kickstand. It's just there for some balance. I've got about 10 to 20% of weight on this leg, 80 to 90% on this leg, and I'm gonna perform the same movement. And so one way to get into that position is maybe just bring it to the top, then kick that leg back, and then the same mechanics as before.
And all this can be done with dumbbell as well. Just, you know, if you don't have a bar or you're just like trying to be super efficient at the gym and not monopolize a bunch of equipment, things like that, and it's hard, maybe you can't get a squat rack. Yeah, I mean, doing this with dumbbells, obviously little changes, but I mean,
yeah,
same
and
moves.
this exercise in particular, the split stance RDL, I think is great with dumbbells, just because you can kind of maneuver the dumbbells around this knee a little bit easier. So why don't we show it here, and then we'll grab a set of dumbbells and we can show it that way too. So just give me just a regular deadlift to the top, so 2 feet together. Okay. Start from the top, and then we'll move our way down with the split stance. So now take that slight offset, and then real slow on the way down. And remember, it's that hips pushing back and back up. Great. That looks like a really good, strong position. How does that feel?
That feels good.
Awesome. Yep, balance it out. Get a few on each leg. Now this is definitely an exercise. I mean, we have the bar preloaded at 135 pounds, but this is going to be a lighter exercise. Of course, you're just doing one leg at a time. You don't have as much stability from being on both legs.
Yeah. Right?
Taking things onto one leg, that's just a way of taking away some stability or adding instability. Now you're having to handle more different force direction because you got side to side balance now as a factor. And so when we have less stability, we want to bring loads down just to keep us safe, and because you're just not going to be as strong. Yeah, let's grab a couple dumbbells and you can just see and feel what that looks like. And so one of the benefits of having the dumbbells is that your hands, now your grip and the hands can kind of move in different positions. And you might find like, oh, I can keep that much closer to my center of gravity. Maybe it feels a lot more comfortable. Yep. Perfect. Now, like a snatch grip deadlift is not going to work with dumbbells.
True.
You know, the sumo deadlift can, but it's, you know, you might not get the same value as having a barbell.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, that's definitely able to isolate different parts of the body as I'm going through this.
Yeah. So that was 5 movement variations. I want to talk about 2 more things that I think are important if you're trying to build your deadlift and you're trying to maybe build back from a back injury. The first is that tempo, something like controlling the pace of your lift. You know, we're stronger as we lower things down to the ground because we're not opposing gravity, we're kind of working in the same direction as gravity. So if you're not feeling super confident with your deadlifting, you can always start with a lighter weight, something that feels really confident to pick up the bar, but then you can overload by going really slow on the way back down. And that can be a tool for you to build more time under tension and get more muscle stimulus as you're doing your reps. So instead of grabbing another plate to make it harder, why don't you slow down that lowering? Instead of going down in 2 seconds, go down in 5 seconds. And so you're building more time under tension, you're creating a bit more muscle damage, which is then gonna require rebuilding, muscle synthesis to recover and to grow. So tempo is one important place to look at. And then the second important thing is thinking about the positions that are most vulnerable to you. Where do you feel the weakest? Let's strengthen those with pauses. Now, this can be done in the same way that I just did it, with that slow lowering down, or on the way up. But oftentimes people feel really, they can feel like, oh, I get really weak right at this position. Something I noticed when we were deadlifting this morning is that you were having this, you were having to take the bar around your knees. So one way that we could coach you is, okay, Thomas, I want you to pull up to right below your knees and stop, and then finish your lift. So it's called like a segmented deadlift. You're doing 2 different segments. You're pausing at a specific position, and you're pausing at a position that you have an intentional weakness at. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna reinforce this by stopping there. So some people in a sumo deadlift, it could be 1 inch off the ground and then finish. Some people doing Romanian deadlifts, it's right above my knee. That really helps me to focus in on my back and connecting my glutes, and then they finish the rep. So why don't we try that with your sumo?
Okay.
And we'll have you pause right below the knee on the way up. So go ahead and stand up again. Remember your setup. Hips out. Good. Pull up right below the knee and then pause for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and up. Good, and then slow on the way back down. And again. 1, 2, 3, up.
That was a little higher.
Yeah, it's okay. Slow back down. Try it one last time, right below the knee. 1, 2, 3, and up. And then slow back down.
I felt that directly, in a good way, strengthening the lower back. So based upon this, we essentially have, well, 5 variations plus 2 additional ways for each variation.
That's right.
So ultimately you're looking at quite a number of different ways that you can sort of manipulate your deadlift.
Yeah, so if you want to include that and incorporate it into your training, then, and let's say you're going to deadlift once a week. Okay, well, stick to 1 variation for 4 to 6 weeks and see if you can start to feel week after week that you're getting stronger, you're getting more confident. Don't switch it up every single week because you're not going to adapt.
Yeah.
So it's 4 to 6 weeks doing the sumo, and then the next 4 to 6 weeks you might do conventional and so forth. And then if you want to do it twice a week, then maybe you can include 2 different variations on the same week while you're doing your deadlift progressions. And then after a few weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, you start to add in some of those pauses. You start to slow down your tempo on the way down. You can use those variables to sort of make it more challenging or to focus on problem areas that you're experiencing when you're lifting. And I think with that, you got plenty of variety to always be progressing and always be challenging and strengthening this pattern that I think is such a weakness for so many people.
Yeah, that is a bullseye, dead on. So Marcus, where can everyone find you?
You can head over to any of my social media channels at Marcus Philly on YouTube, also on Instagram. That's a great place to get in touch with our content.
Awesome, right on, man.